No, so we have about 20 minutes left, and we also want to get some questions from the audience, but I'll make a quick round from our panel with a question and maybe also the request for a focused answer around the question, as business leaders, as companies see the BRICS, and I had concluded my short presentation with 5 ideas, but from your experience, what would be success factors in the BRICS, expanded BRICS for companies? What could be potential pitfalls? And maybe let me start with you, Trudi. What would you see as key success factors and potential pitfalls?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of success factors, really, it often boils down to the same things in business across different regional blocks. You want to invest in an area where you're going to get a reasonable return, and where you are you have the capacity to reinvest, to grow that business, or to take your money out. And it sounds very straightforward, right? But we know that often in South-South investment, all of those things are very difficult. Macroeconomic conditions often make it very challenging to realize the returns that you expect in terms of sudden changes. I think what is clear with the BRICS countries is that many of them are high-growth economies. So the macroeconomic picture from that perspective is relatively stable. Of course, with expansion, there are countries that bring different kind of complications to that clear macroeconomic picture. I think similarly in the ability to reinvest or take your proceeds out, foreign exchange volatility can often change that picture. And also just capital mobility, capital restrictions sometimes make it difficult for companies to take money out. But once again, I think with most of the BRICS countries, in terms of their capital markets regulation, capital controls, those are not necessarily immediate challenges. But saying this against the context of, for instance, what's happening in Russia, certainly points to what a business would have to really think about in terms of making that business story clear from entry to exit of those profits. I think in general, economic diplomacy is needed even within BRICS countries. It's not that, because we're all similar emerging markets economies, it's all hunky-dory. There are often issues you would see at the WTO. Sometimes we have trade disputes. Sometimes even amongst ourselves, we have questions around logistics, around visas even. So I think from a business perspective, one will have to be very clear, not just a geopolitical muscle, but that economic diplomacy muscle, and which requires a bit more cooperation with your own host government when things become tricky from that perspective. But I would say that certainly when I look at South Africa's experience, corporate experience, initially after the fall of apartheid, there was a move towards the West, given that the business class was most familiar with that. But over time, there's been this opening up. And I think the BRICS countries and the expanded BRICS configuration creates that comfort to deepen those South-South relations in a forum where it feels that issues can be resolved should they arise.
Excellent, thank you very much. Étienne, you're representing a European country in a country that is part of the expanded BRICS. Austrian companies are known for being very export-oriented as well. What do you see as key success factors or potential pitfalls? What's your advice?
Thank you very much. I would say as a main advice, don't be too greedy and be a bit cautious. There is a huge potential to make money, but there's also huge potential to then not get the money out of the country you are making your business. So at least stay out of Russia. So we as Austrian companies have made this experience very hard to get out of the Russian market. So whoever is thinking now of entering the Russian market, don't do it as a Western company. Don't forget that there is something like the extraterritorial application of US sanctions. No Western company can ever afford to be subject to Western, and in particular US sanctions, so keep that in mind. Keep in mind that relations will probably rather be more antagonistic between BRICS countries and the US, the West in general. So you don't want to be caught in between that thing. And honestly speaking, invest in good in-house legal departments and in-house public affairs departments. I'm not speaking from my profession. Hire good former diplomats who are well connected, who may tell you, yeah, maybe you can make money, but maybe you will also then no longer be received by a senator on Capitol Hill. So must really be careful of not losing access to other markets then as well. So it's always a balancing act. If I can give one advice of where you can make money, it probably would be projects that unite the West and the BRICS, be it on climate change, like the UE hosted COP28, we will have COP30 in Brazil. So climate change related projects are less antagonistic and really leading potentially more to success. IMEC could be a huge game changer as well, where infrastructure-wise you can invest with less geopolitical risks and the potential to really make good money with IMEC. And if you want to think about a headquarter for such operations, a regional headquarter, you might really think about this region here, about the UAE, about the Gulf. They are well positioned to potentially serve as a bridge between the East, between China, India, and the West. So that would be my advice.
Very interesting. I think I like also the point about what we describe as building the geopolitical muscle of companies, being able to navigate a new reality, given that the world is not flat anymore, as some people thought in the 1990s and 2000. Constanza, you're representing hundreds of Brazilian companies acting in Brazil, but also across. What's your 1-2 minute view on key success factors and pitfalls?
Well, I think we need to consider that there are three dimensions. Internally, the company, the one of the country that Trudi was saying, and probably if we look into this geopolitical and geoeconomic muscle that you were saying, in terms of key success, first I would say understanding multipolarity and non-alignment. So recognize the BRICS' role in a multipolar world and the varied geopolitical stances of its members. Second one, navigating internal dynamics. So companies need to be mindful of tensions within the bloc, and such as diverging agendas among members, knowing about that. And third, in terms of key success factors, engaging in sustainable and diversified strategies. So companies need, as far as it's possible, to diversify investment across sectors and geographies to mitigate risk. And in terms of pitfalls to avoid three, geopolitical divisions, companies also need to be cautious about the fragmentation within BRICS due to competing national interests. Third, technological divergence. Companies need to have a plan for compatibility challenges in a fragmented technological landscape within the BRICS. And last but not least, the erosion of cohesiveness. So companies need to account of the risk posed by BRICS expansion in its internal unity. We will have to see how this goes in terms of the future and whether this can be a challenge for companies' operations. So I would sum up with those 6.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, what would be your perspective, a couple of minutes on, maybe also from a Chinese perspective, key success factors and pitfalls?
First of all, I guess the one factor is we should take one strategy for one country because all these BRICS have been very diversified in terms of different development strategy, different social system. You cannot use one strategy for all of BRIC countries. For example, I guess 2 or 3 weeks, I, with some Chinese businessmen, met some businessmen in South Africa. We asked them, what do you want? In my mind, Chinese can provide EV. They said, no, we don't want an EV now. Maybe in 5 years, because we don't have kind of infrastructure for EV. What we want is we may look at some outdated facility in China. For example, like a blast furnace, you can dismantle it, remove the part to our country, which reminded me actually back 20, 30 years ago, China did the same thing. We dismantled some outdated facility in US, in Japan, then move their, the parts back to China, then assemble it. That's the first factor. Second factor, we should deeply study the business environment, law and regulation continuously. Not only invest before invest, also after invest in the operation. For example, like currently the US government have a lot of restriction on investment, particularly in China. I guess a couple days ago, one biochemical US company come to my office, ask me what they're supposed to do. I say, yes, in some case now China in the very difficult position, but you look deeply on your specific industry, you do have some potential, because at least until now, biochemical industry is not in the small yard of the US government. Also in China, the middle class grow up, the population started aging. Also, Chinese government has started build lots of hospitals. That's great needs for your specific industry. The second factor is should fully use and trust local talents and experts. In this case, I guess US multiple companies did very well, particularly in China. Not like in some countries, they prefer use their own citizenship, their citizen. Not like US companies, they just want to use every talent, even local people. So-called pitfall, I guess something should be avoided. First of all, decision-making sometimes is too much concentrated in headquarters. That's something should be avoided. Secondly, should not simply copy experience in advanced countries, even it was successful in advanced countries or even in other developing countries, should do something deeply fit to specific countries. That's my...
Great.